provided, we're estimating annual CIP of about $93 million dollars annually, and that would be from FY24 through 28. What we've also done is programmed 5% annual revenue increases over the forecast period. Scott Motors revenues, that will start in FY27, and we're estimating about $2.5 million. There's no minimum allowance adjustment or revenue impact associated with that adjustment. And the forecast meets our debt service coverage requirements target of a 2.0 over the forecast period.
Is the debt service coverage, what kind of leeway do we have in that? 2% is just a goal?
Sorry. Okay. So 2% is the target that has been established for the city as it relates to meeting and maintaining your creditworthiness and, demonstrating to be financially sound with how you service your debt. And the target is about a 1.5, but the objective is to demonstrate better so as you go forward.
So we'll have a little bit of leeway.
Yes. But we really try to stick with achieving the target.
Right.
So you can maintain your credit rating and so forth. So giving you a highlight of the initial results. Line 1 highlights the annual revenue increases. Line 2 highlights the debt service coverage. And you see we go from like a estimated 1.84 or 2.0 by the end of the forecast period. And we have the 93 million annually in CIP. So going into a little more detail as it relates to the financial plan, you can see, not just from here, so you can see, we're generating total revenues of about 184.6 million by the end of 2028. That's based on existing rates. Upon incorporating the rate increases, incorporating the estimates of other revenues, we get to about 252.9. We will then be able to service our annual operating expense requirements, which is line 12, along with the debt service requirements, which is the total aggregate is highlighted in line 16. As you can see in line 15, you start to add debt service starting in 25, 26, and it kind of goes up gradually as such. We have some funding of CIP projects through cash, and ultimately we produce a positive operating balance. And in aggregate, it all allows us to meet our debt service coverage requirement in line 21. So that then becomes the impact of that annual 5% as it relates to meeting your debt service coverage requirements, having a stable annual increase, and being able to support 93 million in CIP projects annually.
Robert, we've traditionally, in the 7 years I've been here, we've tried to do 120 CIP. Is the 93 going to be enough for us to meet our requirements to EPA?
I'll address that in a later slide, Councilman.
Okay.
If you don't mind holding that for me.
I'll withdraw that question.
Hey, let me just add.
Can you say it on the mic? Thank you.
So the questions y'all bring about the 2.0 debt service coverage is a very good question. This works from 1.84 to 2.0. Looking at this plan, though, I've already spoken with our financial advisor, Brent. We've talked through this plan. I didn't have these exact numbers. When I talked to him this past weekend, I think I used 1.81 as my starting point. I had to make a few calculations, that was kind of last week. So we're very comfortable in the talking to the rating agencies with this plan. The near certainty of the 5% each year, growing that up to the 2.0. And then realistically, even though we're talking 93 million each year, we've had several years recently that have been much lower. than that amount. So we feel pretty comfortable going and talking to the rating agencies. And I'll remind everyone, rating agencies don't drive everything that we do, but they do have an impact on what we pay for that debt service and the interest. So it is important. It's a very important aspect of the overall plan. So sometimes I feel like we get too much focus on it, but it is still an important part.
So going into financial considerations,
Can I ask a quick question then? So you're projecting over 5 years, $51 million in rate increase. 5 to 50, right? Rate increase.
that becomes the total
Over
aggregate
those 5 years.
of the 5 years, yes.
So then your additional revenue, because I like when the mayor brought up last time, I'd rather use rate and revenue, not revenue and revenue, but it's just easier to compartmentalize the two. So your additional revenue, you're estimating at $17 million a year.
Would that be line 10?
Yeah, 10. So that's made of what?
Okay, so that's made of other services that you may provide, expansion fees, cutoff fees, late fees, certain other revenue components that we don't call user rate revenue.
So all right, got it. So where would be where is the economic development? So if we do, add Scout Motors and 10 hotels and 400 homes and blah, 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 where would all that be?
So currently, Scout Motors is in that number.
Of other revenue?
Correct.
Where would just be traditional organic growth within the city of Columbia?
Line 1 and line 2.
Line 1 and line 2. So minimal, you're projecting minimal growth.
Yes, and it's a 1.1%.
How'd you come up with that number? I'm just curious.
So what we've done is historically, we've looked at what you've done historically as it relates to adding customers. We also look at your build-up record as it relates to new anticipated customers, whether it be commercial, large commercial industrials, for example, Scout Motors. And then you have a ceiling and a floor. And then we look at, economically, what you're planning on getting as it relates to build-up. And in understanding the combination of those numbers, then we go about establishing a growth rate that we deem to be appropriate with what you've done historically and what we foresee going forward.
So theoretically, if you had a 2% growth rate, you would not need as much of a rate increase, or would you?
I can't say that would be the case because a 2% may give you a few more dollars, but it would not prevent the need for a rate increase.
Well, I didn't say that. I said,
Okay.
I'll use a different number. Suppose you had a 6% economic growth.
Okay.
Then it is reasonable that 6% economic growth would offset the 5% rate increase.
It's reasonable to say that that 6% would offset a portion of the rate increase that would be required.
Right. So I guess I'm trying to make a point, but y'all are not working with me very well.
Maybe they are.
We're picking up what you're doing.
Well,
My point is, I'll make it as clear as possible. My point is, the better your economic growth, that would offset your need for a rate increase, which is why I would like to have the word revenue mean revenue and the word rate mean rate. So all I'm saying is that if we, no offense to everybody, but 1.1 growth over the next 5 years is not fantastic. Right? Everybody?
Well, I don't know that. What is the industry standard? What rate are cities growing at?
So it depends on where you are.
Well,
Right
that's-
now,
yeah.
in this part of the country, we're seeing somewhere in the range of 1 to 2%. In other parts, we're seeing 3 to 4%.
What are
but-
other parts?
For example, if you look at somewhere like, let's say, Raleigh, North Carolina, which is one of the fastest growing areas in the country,
They got 12.8% overall growth.
there.
Right.
But we're not using 12.8 to
Right,
estimate,
no,
but
but that's their overall
my point
Right.
exactly.
growth.
And we don't
In
want to
other
be right.
places in South Carolina,
Right.
you're seeing 1 to 2%, but again, it's about how you find a balance because you don't want to, while you may estimate growth, it's not guaranteed and you don't want to overstate revenues. So you try to find a balance that's appropriate and representative of.
Which is fine, but also not my point. My point isn't about either criticizing or nor supporting your 1.1% growth, because that's your number, not mine. And I don't have any data to tell you it should be different, right? So I don't know. All I'm saying is if that number was higher, more growth would be better than less growth. I'll make that my statement.
Yes.
More growth is better than less growth. And if you look at other areas in the region, otherwise known as the Southeast, they have higher growth than we do. Okay.
Are we talking apples and oranges here, though, when you're talking about economic growth? Because we're talking water here, water and sewer rates.
We can't have economic growth and not water growth.
Yeah, but some of that water has already been used. I mean, if they're moving into a building that's been using 100,000 gallons a year, and they're
using.
But I think,
well, it's got to be new economic growth.
Okay, I'll revise my statement as new economic growth, which would be
Yeah, it's got,
implied, I'm implying that economic growth is new, not old.
yeah, and I think your point, I think the bigger picture is the multiplicity effect of economic growth and how it can impact water, sewer, and
Yeah.
is coming onto the system. So I totally understand what you're saying.
And what I would like, assuming, and if this gets adopted, what I'd like to see going forward is this laid out that way. And if your economic growth, obviously we see how that affects all this. So again, I'm not anti-rate increase, but I think it's the distinction of rate versus revenue should be noted, and the concept that economic growth could most likely offset the need for future rate increases.
And I don't know, to Mr. Brown's point, if you heard the discussion, probably not, Robert, because we're all just going from meeting to meeting today, but there was a really interesting discussion in the Economic and Development and Infrastructure Committee about growth. And I think one of the things that you all probably need to clarify from council, and maybe Teresa helps you do this, if you approve the 5% over 5 years, it is in a sense locking us into doing that. However, if these other things are going on through our economic development efforts and some of the things that we're learning and trying to move in a certain regard with, if that produces a certain amount of growth, that's then producing developers to do what they say they would love to do if they see a certain amount of growth. And if it's significant, would future councils have the opportunity to adjust based off if you had enough evidence at that point in future years to project a higher growth rate into the rate analysis?
Okay, that's a very interesting point and a great point. Thank you. It becomes the will and policy of the council that in the future, if you go and you see that there is more growth than you're producing, and with getting more growth, you have more costs, but there is an opportunity, to support or help, and even on the other side, if you're not producing enough to meet your requirements under this plan, it then becomes a policy decision by council on either side where and how to go and how to adjust so that you're meeting your requirements. So that's
a great point.
That's always.
in other words, we're still gonna need Robert every year.
Maybe not, but it then becomes your will to do it.
Well, we get done with our EPA stuff and can just focus on maintenance and stuff. That changes the dynamics as well.
Yeah.
To that exact point, the plan is to show you financial model results every year. The request is going to be that levelized 5% revenue adjustment, rate adjustment, excuse me. We're going to reevaluate those numbers every year. Our hope is that we'll be able to demonstrate the ability to execute the 93 and that the financial performance would show for the next year, we could plug in a capital improvement plan of maybe 100 million or 110. Once that gets to the point of maximum need or maximum ability to execute, then we would be looking at, okay, does the rate need to be adjusted? Or if we've got unforeseen, unmodeled growth. I'll say this, engineers are conservative by nature. And once the financial, past results are no guarantee of future performance. But in general, we outperform the financial model. We're a little more aggressive in modeling now. So we'll have to see where that goes. But I wanted to give you an idea, a flavor of what we can do with the 93 million. Councilman Duvall, I'll get to your specific question in a moment about consent decree compliance, because I think it's very important. We have trimmed our water CIP back from the original 120 request back to about 28.5. But you can see we're still investing in a lot of areas, repairing, replacing hydrants that are out of service. Desperately needs to be done. Catching a couple of those meters, AMI change outs that need to be done that were more problematic. Doing some improvements at our water treatment plants and addressing water quality issues. Not quite at the pace that we were before, but still putting a good bit of funding into the water quality improvement area and serving our customers. And that's where we get a lot of our complaints.
So what projects fell off from 2 weeks ago to today?
So we deferred, and I'll get you a very detailed.
Yeah, that's what I'm a little angry about.
Rosewood phase one is not on this list because it's in procurement right now.
Right.
Yes. Rosewood phase two moved out a year, and phase three moved out. Shandon is still on this list, and that's out of our 5-year projection. So I'll get you the detailed list, the side-by-side comparison.
So, but if we approve this 5-year, Ms. Wilson said we're locking in to this investment for 5 years. What about 3 years ago when we locked in to $21 million for the 3 phases of Rosewood? What happened to that money?
So we locked in the plan, but the funding didn't follow. So
But 2 of the 3 years the funding did follow, correct?
2 out of 3 years, we had a 0% rate increase. So we had to collapse. And then phase one would be under construction right now. Councilman had not been waiting for the SCIP grant. So we were waiting to see if we were awarded that. But that's the funding. We're moving forward. Phase two, we can.
Well, how many brown water projects down the road in year 3, 4, 5, your plan of this plan are there compared to the need now for brown water projects?
We are trying, I'll have to get you a number of how many. I mean, we've got 2 phases in Shandon and 3 phases in Rosewood that are baked into the 5-year plan. It's how quickly we advance through them. But then we had some other areas on the perimeter of town that we were going to move forward with, and those have fallen off of this year's plan. So maybe a little bit of investment in Irmo, a little additional investment in Forest Lake, a few of those, but I'll get you the side-by-side comparison. It may help answer that question.
Can you send that to all of us?
Yes, ma'am. I'd be glad to. So let's talk about.
Well, I have one other
Yeah.
question.
Sorry.
And what's the dollar amount, the difference in the dollar amount fell off?
So for water, our request 2 weeks ago was 40 million. It's
Okay.
28.5 right now. Of course, that compounds every year. But again, we're hoping to be able to outperform the financial model and step up that CIP.
Did you say?
Yeah, please do.
So just to make one point, coming back to your question as it relates to budgeting and how the projects fall off and what happened 3 years ago. So as you know, on an annual basis, you do the operating and capital budget. And while you may have a CIP that has projects 5 years out, at that time of the budget, you look at that budget year and then determine based on what project can handle, what should be done, risk of failure, all the stock condition of the asset, et cetera, or whatever you're replacing, if it needs to be done. At that time, it's approved, and then whatever else isn't approved may get moved forward, et cetera, et cetera. So while you may hear that a project fell off or is moved, it's not that it was funded and it isn't funded, but in the budget year, if it then is funded, it then goes and the funding stays in an account and it's eventually taken off the CIP. If it's not
Robert, it's adjusted by y'all, basically.
Yeah, I just.
Okay, I know that.
All right, thank you.
But that, and Robert, I think, was touching on a little more about the why or the decision making or judgment calls that have to be made on which project. So I didn't want y'all to kind of gloss over that. I think that is very important. The council and the citizens to hear, are there life safety issues? Are there, what helps you make these decisions as we're making a decision about the big number of the projects that get done? Are they in process? Are they almost done? How do we determine?
Yes, ma'am. Typically, it's public health, safety, regulatory compliance. Those are number one on our list. Water quality, very high on our list. Fire protection, ability to move the water throughout our system, capacity, we call that very high on the list as well. So, and I think we funded engineering for a lot of these projects, so they're designed and they're waiting to go. And we've also seen some cost escalation. And so as our design consultants come back and say that project that was originally estimated at $8 million is now $12 million.
CIP for last year was it was 80 instead of 120.
And 40 last year, sir.
40?
Yes, sir.
We haven't spent 120. That was our whole purpose in our last 2 weeks discussion is that we keep building everything off, but we can't actually get the work done. So let's plan what we reasonably believe we can get done, and let's focus on that.
But if we have 120 out there and he's got the engineering done on it, don't you think we will be able to spend 120?
We haven't done it yet.
We have averaged over the last 5 years a CIP of 80 million and execution of 80 million. So I can't say we can't do 120 because we haven't had the opportunity to do 120, but we also have not demonstrated to you that we can do 120.
Well, the opportunity comes from the council budgeting 120 and you getting the engineering done so that you can be shovel
I think they have an opportunity this time with the 93, and I'm sure Clint's about to get to that, to demonstrate, which I'm looking to see that demonstration too. It's an ongoing discussion with this team and they're working really hard. But there's some other built-in things this year, like the grant funds and some other federal dollars. Clint's going to talk about. So maybe that'll give us a little peek into what they can do without you all pulling the trigger to budget all the way to 120. They're almost going to be a little bit over 120 if you factor in those additional funding sources.
And if you plan in a 5-year plan and they know that's what the plan is, it also gives them flexibility, to get to where you are. And so maybe this year maybe he gets to 93 and next year he says, you know what, I'm gonna get to 120, and the next year it drops down because he doesn't need to get there because he's catch up ground. But right now with it, when we go year to year, they can't really plan.
Mm-hmm. But also to that point though, Mr. Mayor, I don't understand why you couldn't have, for example, designed all 3 phases of Rosewood, right? Why not just do them all at the same time?
So I know are we finished with design of phase 3? We are. So we're done with the design.
You're designed with 1, 2, and 3.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. So to Mr. Duvall's point of there's a carryover of $40 million. What does that mean?
So there's a $40 million CIP from last year. The projects that y'all have been approving on council agenda, we're working down that 40. So, but if part of that was design of a water line improvement in Irmo or on North Main Street or something like that, we may not be ready for construction. We may have just funded the design. And this year, then we would move forward with the construction. The ability to execute is very important. We understand that. The 90 right now, the 64.5 that you've got in wastewater is actually that plus 35 million in Department of Commerce dollars to support Scout Motors, plus an additional 10 million in the SCIP grant that we got for Lower Crane Creek. So
Clint, I just kind of bottom line it for you. I think what Mr. Brandon's trying to say in a very calm, nice manner is that we spent millions and millions of dollars dealing with Crane Creek that's outside the city, and he's got a neighborhood that is on his ass, for lack of a better term, about making sure those 3 phases get done. And he wants to know why we can't get that done.
Taking care of the current system before expansion.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, well, we'll take that under advisement and revise our CIP and get back to you with some Rosewood phase 2.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Make that work. Okay, so again, the opportunity to do more.
It's smooth.
I want to talk about some of the risks, because you asked about the risk and then opportunities about that. So I won't focus on the risk. I do need to say that if EPA denies our force majeure request, we'll have to pour more into wastewater improvements and less into drinking water improvements, even more of a disparity in the balance there. If the PFAS regulation for drinking water becomes a reality in this 5-year planning period, all bets are off. That could be tremendous additional investment and rate adjustments, revenue needed to try to comply with that. And we're doing everything we can to make sure reason is applied there.
When we talk about that, I mean, we have a concept number though, it's a lot.
Oh, yes, sir.
250 million, right?
Yeah, well, it's between 150, 200 in capital, and it's over 20 million additional O&M costs, and that's the real kicker to us in the rates.
Okay. It's a lot.
It's tremendous, yes, sir.
So if I wrote down 200 million, that would be a
Yes, sir.
reasonable number, sir.
You know, if inflationary pressures, if we continue to see high single and double digit inflation, you know, those are game changers that we haven't modeled. And all those things have implications, ability to deliver on the obligation, potential moratoriums, extended consent decree timeline. The less money we spend, the longer we go through this consent decree, the quicker we can spend dollars, the quicker we can get out of it. But we've got to be able to execute and understand it and figure loud and clear there. And the reduction in the rate of replacing infrastructure is certainly a risk that we're facing. The opportunities that we really like about this plan is that stability for planning purposes. You spoke about that, the ability to plan that. And the proposed increase of 5 a year is higher than what we've averaged over the last 15 years and certainly over the last 3 or so. We believe it would be potentially favorably viewed by the bond rating agencies. Jeff's spoken with Robertson about that, and we think there's some positive viewing of ability to willingness to adjust rates annually. It'll give us a chance to demonstrate that we can do more than 80 in a CIP. Allow EPA to respond to our force majeure request, because that takes a lot of the pressure off. More freedom there, if that's approved. And then that potential for increased CIP in future years based on a plan above and beyond what's obvious. I'm going to let Robert talk about utility bill impacts and next steps, and then we'll answer questions.
So from the perspective of the utility bill impact, you know, your typical average usage is just about, you know, just under 6,000, let's say, gallons per month. So the line highlighted in blue, you can see the proposed water bill will be about 2502. The proposed sewer bill will be about 46.17. The total aggregate increase would be about $3.39 per month. When we look at that number as compared to other, let's say, neighboring or comparative systems, we can see that on the water side, we're, you know, just beneath the average. You know, you could say that we're on the lower end. And when you look at the sewer typical bill, you know, you could make the same reference that we're on just below the average or on the lower end of what others are currently charging for service currently.
I know that you use the 5,984. That's just a math thing, right? So would that represent a family of 4? Would it represent a house of 2,000 square? What could I put that in usage terms?
It represents about a family of four. But what we really do to understand what that average is, we look at your billing information for, let's say, your residential class, and based on the residential customers and the usage.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying. I get that, but I'm just trying to put it, so, I mean, it would represent.
I think the Richland County demographic is under 4. It's around 3 per household when you look at it in terms of Richland County. But again, the city may have a little different than ours.
So it's really a family of 3 to 4.
Yes, sir.
But the 6,000 figure is used almost universally, isn't it? When you look at it, everybody uses 6,000.
Typically, it depends, but it's between 4 to 6, and it just depends on the system. Okay, so next steps, look about approving the recommended adjustments, monitoring the implementation in FY 24 of your operating and capital program to see how you're performing, specifically as you implement the capital projects, and then ultimately, monitoring financial performance of the system, over this year. So thank you. Any additional questions?
Good study.
Good work, Robert.
Thank you, Roger. So Mary's not at this stage factoring in the adjustment for the Rosewood project, moving towards that next phase. But the overall 5% over the next 5 years, are we safe to move forward with those? With that for our budget?
I think we're gonna have to, for us to get these projects completed. Now, obviously, if we see a big growth increase, then that may level out. But, we haven't had an increase in 3 years. It took a pretty sizable hit, to help people through the pandemic. Our costs to operate aren't going down. We're doing everything to be more efficient. We don't have nearly as many employees we had over there. We're doing the work that those folks didn't do. I think for planning and giving us the flexibility so that we can address issues like Rosewood and other stuff in between, this is what we need to do.
Yes, sir.
I think it's an excellent idea. I'm pleased that the mayor pushed this thing forward. It takes away a lot of the political pressure too. And although I'm not worried about that now, I think it's a good thing to do.
Okay. Thank you. So we'll continue with our discussions on additional items. One is regarding our parking system and specifically the parking fund. And throughout the budget process, we bring you all the funds. So we still got to bring the big elephant in the room to you next week in the general fund. But we would have pretty much covered some of the other funds and enterprise funds like parking. Most of you also are aware of a parking study that we've had underway. Staff have seen iterations of it. We pushed the consultant a little bit more and pushed the consultant a little bit more. And so we do have it. I think that it is and deserves a certain level of attention from you that I don't want to just throw at you in the midst of the bigger budget discussion. I mean, we need to get through the budget discussion and spend the right adequate amount of time on that so I can get all of your feedback. So my goal is to get through the budget discussion. The parking fund really is pretty stagnant for the most part. We're going to highlight a few items that were already underway and things that I think are good efficiencies we need to go ahead and do. But they're not things that would be impacted by anything coming out of the parking study. And then once we get through budget, we'll bring back the parking study and get that analysis in front of you and feedback.
And I appreciate you putting it like that. I think it is important that follows. this part of the process.
Yes, sir. So with that, we will give you kind of what it is and what it has been and talk about some low hanging fruit that we feel like we can go ahead and address to include some facilities related matters as well. And I see a lot of our wonderful parking staff.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. It's good to be with you all, Mayor and City Council. As discussed, we're going to move forward with the continued budget discussions. Today, we'll focus on the parking fund, which is an enterprise fund of the city as well. Our proposed parking fund budget is $10.4 million. Highlights of the parking fund, focusing first on revenues and transfers in. Our revenues are looking pretty good. Jeff said that this is the last time that we can reference pre-pandemic. and that's very true. That is the intention, that this would be one of the last times we reference pre-pandemic levels with regard to a lot of our revenues. You may see it some discussed in the general fund, but parking fund in particular, because parking fund was one of those revenue sources that probably we saw the most impact with regards to the pandemic. So we're glad to see that revenues are looking really something better than pre-pandemic in some ways. So, but revenues we're projecting at 10.2 million, which is 1.1 or 12% over the current year budget, but it's in line with actual collections. So don't let the 12% sort of give you thought that that's what we're expecting to improve in collections. That's just over budget. Parking decks and parking lots are some of the biggest increases with 1.3 million. And that is in part due to the 2 new decks being fully reflected in coming budgets that were added this past fiscal year, Seville and Freed. And of course, special event revenues. Columbia is a very happening place, a lot of activities, a lot of things going on. The parking system is also benefiting from those special events.
On the parking garages, how many of those spaces are sold outright to somebody?
So we have, well, and I have a slide that's going to talk to some pieces of that, and Ms. Matney can speak to again about, be ready to talk about what we have in terms of monthly parkers. Good question, sir.
I'll be patient.
Ms. Wilson has mentioned that she has a parking study that she is ready to present. She'll be ready to present to City Council post the budget discussions. Wanted to give it some more time and thought and bring it back to you, so I won't belabor on that piece. But moving on to the slide, we'll sort of get to what our Councilman Brown mentioned with regards to expenditures. The parking fund budget, parking operations. Would consist of all of the staff, with enforcement staff, and management staff, special event staff, customer service folks. That would be the parking operations budget. It's an increase of 3.4, right at 3.5 million. The debt service is the next item that is makes up a majority of the parking fund budget. That debt service schedule is based on existing debt schedules. Pretty much along with current year debt schedules. Parking facilities, that would be our general services, support services crews that help maintain our garages and manage those garages. Of course, we have a transfer out that includes an allocation to the general fund. And then we have a small amount for the finance department, which is the payment staff, and public works is a minor amount as well. With regards to the parking system, the overall parking fund supports 3,400 monthly parkers, 3,600 on-street meters, 1,400 street passport devices, 10 or 11 decks within Divine Street, and then of course for 14 service lights. I think what your question, Councilman Brown, is about
I guess so. If you take the total spaces in the parking garages, how many of them are sold monthly to a business or whatever? How many are available to the public? And what are they sold for? Does that make sense? Okay.
But part of, I think when we get to the rate study, it will help you see where we are, because we have so many different rates and where we're trying to standardize that. And it really will help answer a lot of those questions.
I also think that in Columbia per se, I'm not sure that people understand like the garages, which one they should park in and which one they shouldn't. Because if it's sold out to everybody, it's hard to, just wasting time driving around. And I have no idea, so I'm not baking in an answer because I don't know what the answer is.
So moving on, I will turn over to Ms. El Matney, our director, who will talk about some exciting things that are happening with our parking services.
Thank you, Missy. Good afternoon, Mayor, City Council. It's a privilege this afternoon to update you on a few ongoing focus areas that we have happening in parking services. We're gonna kickstart with many of you, I'm sure, who have parked all over the country are very familiar with the Bluetooth device. We do have immobilization referenced in our current city ordinance. However, to my understanding, we've not immobilized vehicles since my arrival a few years ago. However, we have partnered with the Barnacle. Anyone in the room heard of the Barnacle? Yeah. Can you?
Is that the name of the restaurant? And
What's coming to?
While frustrating, Barnacle offers a way for you to get back on the road faster than a boot. Just scan the QR code on the device on your windshield. Pay the fee to generate a release code. Enter the code in and take the Barnacle off your windshield. Once you take it off, you will need to return it to one of Barnacle's drop boxes. Don't let parking mistakes ruin your day or wallet. Barnacle is modernizing the way we solve parking challenges without being overly punitive. Barnacle, the future of parking compliance.
Why do I see that myself looking in the back of my wife's car?
If y'all could see my face right now after listening to that.
Options with the Barnacle. We've been working with the Barnacle, let's say probably 12 months a year on the rollout. Charleston rolled it out about 9 months ago, have had great success. So it does have GPS tracking. So internal.
So you'll know it's in my wife's car.
Right. So there's a few great features about the Barnacle. First of all, if someone tries to drive off with it on their windshield, a very loud alarm sounds. We will be notified via text that someone is driving with the Barnacle on the windshield. And it has a GPS tracking device, so we'll always know where they are.
I was gonna say that was the chief's problem. I'm listening.
Your location is one of the drop locations you were kind enough to do for us. So we'll have CPD headquarters, we'll have the parking office, and we'll have 3 drop boxes throughout the city. Keep in mind, the Barnacle is rolling out unlimited blocks, not throughout the city. So we've received significant complaint about backing up traffic along Main Street, Saluda. There's some highly traveled blocks. That's where this is going to roll out. So you won't see it all throughout the city. You won't see it in residential neighborhoods. This is to streamline the process by getting the tow trucks off of those highly traveled blocks. And also for the parker, you can pay your outstanding citations online. You can get a code and you can remove it within moments as you see the video and drop it into one of the receptacles or drop locations. If the device is not returned within 24 hours, there is a hold fee that's placed on your credit card that you may be subject to if it's not returned.
What is the price of that whole fee?
$250.
That's been through legal.
How does that stick to the windshield?
It's highly pressurized cups. And I think a few of us saw it demonstrated a few months ago. So you have these cups on the inside.
Okay.
Yep, just
like suction.
like a major suction. You can't get it off. And if someone does tamper with the device, again, we get an alarm that it's being tampered with. But I think it also the release fee currently in the city ordinance is $35. Considering if what the fees are to tow your vehicle is much more expensive. It is. And I think the ease of paying citations, putting in your code and taking it off, and you can get on about your way.
So what's the threshold for that to be assigned to your vehicle?
We call that being bar.
Barnacle. That would be 3 or more citations, older than 30 days, over $100.
Wait, say that one more time.
3 or more citations, older than 30 days, with a value of more than $100.
You got any letters right?
Total.
I think I do.
So if you have $140 of outstanding parking citations, and you're on one of the designated blocks, you can receive a barnacle. If you're not, if you're in a residential neighborhood or elsewhere in the city, you would be potentially towed.
And the idea too is to pilot it in these highly traffic areas where, you know, the tow truck is blocking, as you said, the street. But if it works well, then we may possibly expand that area.
So the particleization of things is it a and or those three things?
We'll put that under the river. How it works.
Is that all you had to check all three of those boxes or just one of those three?
The
three or more.
Boxes?
No.
All three.
What?
Three or more,
3 or
older than 30 days or
Yes.
$100. You had to check all three?
Yes,
Okay, you gotta check all three.
yes.
Gotcha.
And then you add $35 on top of that.
Correct.
That's not bad.
Now, talk about how we find those cars, because we're not out looking for them, so just talk about that on our follow.
Right, so enforcement is divided up in zones throughout the city, and a monitor is enforcing their particular zone. And then when they come up, they run the tag on the vehicle, then it will tell him or her in their handheld if there's outstanding citations. And upon them having all of those boxes checked, they call to base back at the parking office for confirmation that they indeed do have this amount outstanding, this many citations. And again, some of our regular customers, you know, can get up close to $1,500, $2,000 in outstanding citations.
Jeez.
Any further questions about the barnacle?
Don't get the barnacle. That should be the thing. Pay your tickets, don't get the barnacle.
That's right. The next innovation that we have coming to parking, we have worked with T2, which is our current enforcement platform that we are issuing parking citations, is we are developing a component, a module within the T2 platform for citation collection services. So we don't have a mechanism currently in parking services to collect other than immobilizing or towing a vehicle. We do send out daily emails and monthly citation statements in partnership with the DMV. But those that are outstanding, ready for collection, we don't have a program in place. So we're real excited about this in the upcoming year.
Do you use the set-off debt collection program?
We do not.
Why not?
Happy to look into it.
So if you get a parking ticket, what are the current ways to pay it?
You can come to the parking office at 820 Washington. You can visit the Hardin Street Payment Center. Or most individuals pay online through the T2 platform. That's right. The most highly utilized.
Or you can mail in a check, right?
Yes, sir. So what will happen with the citation collection services module is it's automated on the T2 platform. So we as a city will give you 60 days to pay a citation. And on the 61st day, it automatically will roll into collection services. And then T2 will handle collections.
Why do you wait for 60 days?
To give an individual ample time for payment.
It used to be a lot shorter, didn't it?
Well,
I'm gonna tell you, I'm less likely to tell you.
You don't receive it.
60-day wait time than I am on a 30-day wait time.
So the first late fee occurs at 30 days.
Yeah, late fee at 30 days.
But we don't send a
receive
notice till the 60th day, is that correct?
Yeah, well, you'll get a notice, a mailed statement at 30 days through the DMV when we work with files and license plates. But if you receive an $8 citation 30 days later, it'll become $18. The next 30 day, it doubles, so it would equate to $36.
Do you know what the T2 charges you for collection?
Yes, sir.
Would you divulge that?
He's trying to sell for the municipal association. I just want you to know, he's got an alternative motive here.
The fee
Got a retirement
for
job.
collection, if on that 61st day you have unpaid and you are pursued by the citation collection services, is $15 per citation.
$15 flat fee per citation.
Correct.
$15 per citation or by total
No.
debt
No, per citation.
per citation?
So
It'd be a whole lot better than set off debt.
the goal of parking services is compliance. That's our objective, that folks are utilizing the parking system as set forth, and compliance is what we're striving for. So I think some of these innovative tools coming to parking services, I think will enable that mind shift. Compliance is what the objective truly is.
How long has the parking ticket been $8?
A very long time, sir.
Well,
Define long time in your mind, 10 years?
why you don't have?
20 years?
What's the question? What was the
How long
question?
has it been $8 parking tickets?
To my understanding.
Oh, no, I remember 7. I remember
That's like
$7.
30 years.
That's a long time to keep something the same. I mean, a lot of this depends on what.
Yeah, I remember 7.
So the only thing that I recall we've increased about 8 to 10 years ago, from $7 on.
That's right, I remember
to
that. Yeah, okay, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I
The
remember,
$7 has probably been there for 20 years prior to that.
yeah, I remember the $7 ticket. But I also feel like I remember that the $7 ticket, you had like 5 days to pay it. You didn't have 60 days to pay, you had 5 days. And by the time I got home and figured out how to pull it out of my center council, and mail a check, again, years 10 years ago, I was more likely to mail a check than I would today. But anyway, I just remember that the fee went up quickly.
It still does. The hell, will you locate that schedule?
Right, so that, again, you receive the $8 citation, and we still do have a $7, by the way, in addition to the $8. So you receive the $8 citation in 30 days. It will receive a $10 late fee.
I'm okay with 30 days, but my memory tells me back in the day, it went up faster than the 30 days, but maybe I'm misremembering.
To my understanding.
So I don't know, I'm just saying, I just
It's like-
remember by the time you had a chance to pay it, you're already on the verge of not being able to pay it.
I think it's still like that.
It is. If you choose to appeal your citation, that needs to be done within 7 days. We have modified that within the last 5 years. So that at one point was 30 days, and it's now 7 business days if you choose to appeal a citation.
So, yeah, I don't guess much people are doing that, but I guess in my mind, if this has been $7 to $8 for 30 years, that's probably nothing else is $7 to $8 after 30 years. If you're trying to, in my opinion, first of all, I'm pro free parking. So, but if I wasn't pro free parking and I wanted pro compliance, I would charge $20 for the ticket and maybe be less punitive on, the 30 days, but you're not stopping me from parking where I don't want to for $7 or $8. I'm gonna park wherever I want to in the city of Columbia for $8. I promise you. If I'm got a meeting and there's a space open and I got a 3-hour meeting and I can only put $2 of change in there, I'm doing it. Because you're not gonna change my behavior with $8. You might with $20.
They
but not
wouldn't
with
change
$8.
they wouldn't change your behavior. with
Well, no,
$20.
trust me, $20 still goes a long way. I live with 5 women, so I know how this works. But anyway, I'm just saying, I think we should, again, I'm pro free parking, but if if we end up staying paid parking, I think we can think about behavior modification, and I'm no psychologist, but I do know that the more you charge somebody to not do something wrong, the better chance you have of not doing it.
Isn't, I mean, that's gonna be a conversation from the study, all right.
Right, so those dynamic discussions of dynamic pricing models and perspectives on that is what we're looking for with that parking
Gotcha.
study discussion.
So more at lunch, more than in the high areas, lower in the less areas, the balance, but if you look across, every city's doing that today. You're trying to keep things rotated so businesses thrive. We have, unfortunately, we got campers. You got, you know.
We did. I mean, I'm with you. So, I mean, I hear you.
Well, do you know what Charleston and Greenville charge? What they charge?
It's in the list, but I don't have it in front of me.
Well, you go to Charleston,
It's a lot more.
you go to Charleston, you park in parking garage. That's why I was alluding to the whole thing about, because you can't park on the street. I don't know, there is no real parking per se in a lot of places anymore. So
Greenville is expensive
is it?
because I've spent some money. And I remember
Get a
thinking
ticket? Is that what you're telling me?
something like that, and several tickets because I stayed there longer. But I mean, I might have paid $45 for one meeting that I.
Cheaper than the valet.
Yeah, right. I know. See, and you're talking about my behavior.
I just said I was
The
coming
next
back.
exciting component we have coming to Columbia is again with T2, a different module we're happy to have online, but it's the appeal process. So currently, if you want to appeal a citation, you email services and we work the email box daily. Whether you're requesting monthly parking, you're appealing a citation, it's a very active email box. This will allow the appeal process to be automated. So currently, when you log on to the T2 portal, it will give you the instructions of how to pay your citation. But soon, it will give you an option to pay or appeal. And those appeals will be within 7 days. And if you try to appeal a citation from last October, you'll receive a message back that your citation is not subject for appeal.
How do you automate an appeals process? Is it an automatic note?
No, sir. The emails will still be, the appeals will still be reviewed. But with the automated process, you as a partner will be able to see your photos. So the photos we take along with citations, let's say if you're outside the white lines and you're appealing a citation claiming you weren't in the white lines, and then our photo evidence indicates something different, you'll be able to see those. It also puts a placehold on a potential vehicle being towed, that if you're appealing it, so it doesn't get crossed. You know, if somebody's out towing your vehicle and, you know, you've appealed earlier that day. So it actually places a hold on it, that it's much more innovative. USC allows payment and appeal of citations online. It's a great technology. I'm excited to finally have. So a few of the things exciting coming to parking services.
Where is the great harvest of scrap metal gonna happen?
What scrap?
That's
All the meters. You go to the single meter block.
So we were teed up to talk about Luke, is it?
Yes.
All these names. But I did want, because I think that has some implications about the bigger discussion, Mayor. We were holding that back to incorporate during the parking study discussion.
But we had that anticipated in budgeting process is my.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to touch on it a little bit, Elle, but I wouldn't. I mean, I don't want to confuse these other discussions about dynamic pricing and any changes that might have.
Which all would have.
I would suggest we delay that because I've got some debate I want to have with her on
Okay.
T2.
Well, let's not debate today on that.
He's trying to fund his retirement. I mean,
He's over here. I can see it now. Howard Duvall Parking Services, started in January 2024.
The older generation needs to appeal the throwing away of the parking meters. It's the cheapest way to park, and you put up a T2 that people on 5 Point can't understand how to work it now.
No, with a single unit, it's the easiest way to do it, and it texts your phone and lets you know that your meter's about.
But you can't figure out how to make it work.
What do you mean? The single thing is real easy. You put your plug in, you do that.
Who has the truck license plate?
They can take it, even,
I
look,
think
I'm
you
even,
still
Daniel
need to keep
now, you just take
something.
a picture of it. Yeah, you'll have it on your phone for the rest of your life.
Thank you. Yeah.
You remember your social security number, right?
And his home phone.
Are you-
Hey, Daniel, and his landline.
Go for it. So we'll table that and we're gonna bring that discussion back. One of the things that I will be coming forward as well, a continued assessment of our facilities, but that's underway. There's just some things we really already know though, that are capital needs that we need to get started on. We've identified some funding to do that right now, so,
Sure, so you can see in the first column for the fiscal year 23-24, various projects happening at different locations, and these are existing issues that we are aware of. The 1.9 that you see at the bottom of the column, that is funded. So again, we're working in partnership with Kimley Horn and reassessing our facilities. The last full assessment was in 2013. So rather than updating various documents, we're going back, since it's been 10 years, to get a good reference point, starting point, to create a 5-year projected plan. So the next 4 columns that you see moving forward with what is projected, those numbers are based on the 2013 data, but however, also the funding would need to be acquired through the rate increase.
as far as the immediate concerns, so we call that out, or as far as the fund we're wanting to propose, or are you doing this the 1.9?
So we could switch to, but the proposed 23-24 capital improvement program for the parking fund includes some specific projects with Wilson's mentioning to at Arsenal Hill, Lady Street Garage, Street, Taylor, and Washington. And spoke to those were some.
I thought long-term Arsenal Hill was something that we were looking to get rid of.
That may be the case, but I imagine that this work is things that need to be done, even if it were to change hands.
We've got,
We just got a lot of money budgeted towards it. That's why I'm asking, over a 5-year period, you'll put $1 million in more.
That may change, perhaps they change it with the Arsenal. No.
You have that list of, you've got it for capital improvement program needs. Do you have this same list for revenue generation for the parking lot?
Oh, the lots, that would be part of the study, the study that would come back.
Oh, good point, good point. We're just using that 10 million number at the front. All right, perfect, thanks.
if y'all have any other more specific questions about the facilities themselves and
Well,
needs,
the upgrades of the charging stations, I'm assuming all of those will be paid to charge.
Yes.
Are we charging them?
No. I mean, people are fighting over it because people park there and don't leave, and so somebody else can't get charged. And
But to that, we don't have, that's not in the budget for 23-24.
What's that?
Additional electric charging stations.
Electric charging stations are part of the capital improvement program?
for
This-
25.
I
Wouldn't that be a
see
lease?
it's 24-25. on this one.
So on the additional Wi-Fi, the facility-wide EV charging stations. See, that was, it's in the 24-25.
So that's what I'm saying. People are fighting to use them, but we don't have any.
We don't have enough either today.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. So why aren't we putting some in?
It's not scheduled, but it's coming. Yeah, all right.
But maybe should.
It's really a balance with basic needs and things we have to do versus things we want to do. And this is where we landed, as we get the assessment back, this could.
So we're also going after all that federal money that's available.
Right, we're looking for grant opportunities. We do have, our two newest specs have charging stations that have the capability of charging for power, but we're not doing that yet there.
For pay, you mean?
Yeah.
But Kelvin and Stacy's here, they work hand in glove with Elle on the facilities and the issues at the garages. So.
I mean, when we're looking at the request for next year, it's all the cosmetic stuff that we've been talking about, the upgrades, the painting, the cleaning, elevators.
And y'all, Stacey, jump up if you want to. It's not all cosmetic. Some of it is structural work that needs to be done.
The 1.9 that you see would be immediate urgent needs. And we wanted to move that forward, and that really can be handled out of current fund balance.
Does that include any cosmetic stuff?
Not the 1.9.
Not here, that would be the operating side of the shop. These are capital improvements.
Yeah.
Well, we were talking about skinning, and I think there was an elevator need somewhere.
Stacey, you want to come up?
There's some projects that are underway too. We're
already working on that part of it. We're replacing.
He was trying.
He's in there.
Right.
He said, "I was in the back row for a reason."
We are working on a few now, replacing the elevator, 2 elevators at Lady, replacing the one at something. We're doing painting at Taylor. We're gonna do painting at Lady too. So all the cosmetic stuff we're already working on. It's just a big ticket item.
But Taylor, we are not moving forward because I'm getting a request for that elevator to be
as of today. The inspector called me today, and as of today, we got it installed. So we're working forward to getting it prepared. So whichever way y'all decide to go.
Can we look at trying to add that if we can? It's getting used more and more by all the folks down here this weekend, during the weekends as well.
What's the request outside of what you're already planning to do? Just to replace?
We have to replace that.
Yes, ma'am.
So the 1.9 wouldn't accommodate them?
That particular.
I want to talk about that. That elevator's not active right now. It's not been active
We're charging.
10+ years. There's platforms that elevator lands into an office spot, and each level has platforms that are not manned. And that was the concern. So it was deliberately taken out of service. We've been asked to inspect it to see if it can go back.
Okay.
There's some safety components that have to be accounted for if we do that, with not having space that would be an attractive nuisance at the landing platforms on each level.
So what the cost to do that, if we went in that direction, then you all will know that once you.
We're gonna have to open up that space and wall off that and just open it so it's open, but it's become not only for the monthly renters, but for the folks that are visiting. It's because it's in the center, it's our center garage there, so.
Yeah, so that's a street location across from our street.
Unless you get pricing, see what that will cost to fix. So we're in the process of that.
Okay.
But that's not included in this.
Okay. But we'll take a look.
Take a look when it comes, that'd be great.
Okay. Any other questions with kind of our low hanging fruit and the budget for parking? Okay, thank you. And the barnacle. There's consensus on, those are things we want to kind of move forward. So we put it out in the atmosphere now, so we'll move that along. And moving on to an additional item that we proposed, and we're bringing back the final recommendations on our proposed ordinance changes that include special event fees, parks and recreation fees, police department, false alarm fines. We referenced all of these previously to you all, and just want to actually bring you what those schedules would look like.
So, yes, thank you, Jason, as mentioned, as we talked with you all before, there are certain, events and activities that police and fire are currently, those services are paid for by the requesting organization or individuals, but the other services that the city provides for a lot of these events are not charged. This is in part to help us offset some of that cost, to cover those costs. So just as a little bit of a reminder, a lot of what we're talking about is based on things that were driven by requests that come into the police department, primarily through parade permit requests or special events. Excuse me, the special duty. Sometimes it may also come as other specific requests to, for instance, the public work department, which you'll see that's where a lot of those events are generated from. The event types would be block parties, sometimes concerts, college and university events, festivals, lots of walks and runs, different neighborhood meetings, some nonprofit events, protests, even though those are not things that we obviously charge for, but these are obviously a variety of different things that do utilize city services. In terms of the city department, in terms of the city services provided, we provided a variety of different services. Some of these events are held weekly, some are held monthly, annual events, and then some things are, of course, as needed. Birthday parties, graduation parties, different things like that, or even neighborhood block parties. A lot of times, again, because aside from utilizing public services, a variety of different departments. Some of the services that are provided that some things that are, of course, we do charge for, and then some things that are not charged. Rental park facilities, those are charged. Police services, a parade permit, which we'll get to that piece as well. Fire prevention, fire marshal. Some of the examples of services that are provided that there are not cost recovery would be delivery and pickup of barricades whenever we had street closures. Solid waste roll cart delivery and picking up and tipping of those containers. Traffic control management, whether it's utilizing traffic, the electricity available at a.
Should we charge for the trash dump?
Some when these events are done like this, no.
You said could. You didn't say, right, you said could. Right.
Yeah, but I mean.
All right, well, the answer to his question would be yes, you could.
Well, I thought he said, do we?
No.
We don't now.
We don't know.
But we propose that we should, yes.
And in the barricades, I think we discussed, and we were talking about the other week about the bollards and where those could help in a permanent situation where we're down here, but these others, and then an option I think you discussed was if somebody came to Public Works and picked it up, like if they're having a neighborhood block party or whatever, if they picked them up, then we would wouldn't charge them anything for it. They picked them up and brought them back.
Some of those details would be worked out, of course, in the ordinance as it's proposed. That has been some of the experience we've seen in other places that the items are picked up. Of course, individuals aren't picking up roll carts and delivering the roll carts and dumping the roll carts.
I can see dropping them off and picking them up for free, but if they're full, there's a charge for it because we're having to run out. Because I mean, that case, I'm just going to have an event and just ask y'all to come deliver. Right. And I'll just tell my traffic.
At your house, you're gonna get a $5 permit at your house.
So what we have laid out before you are recommendations for proposed fees for items that we know or services we are providing. Of course, many of these are as needed. Not every event requires every service, and not every services the same level. It really depends on the event and the activity that's on. The current rate for, off-duty police and fire, marshal specifically is currently a $35 rate. We see, we gave an example from other cities at 45, but we've seen as high as $55 and $60 an hour for, sworn officers off duty to pay fees paid directly to the individual. That won't change. That's not what's being proposed here. But we talk about police with this part in general, because it is relative to these events. And it's often the event that is being requested here that spurs the result in other departments providing these other services. So the proposed rate that the police department is recommending is $45 with an additional fee of $5 for administrative and equipment use that will help offset some other associated costs that the city does incur.
So $250 for us to deliver per barricade.
Okay, so with barricades, we've seen variety is.
I mean, $10, we'll burn that in gas.
Right, most barricades, obviously an event, if there's intersection being closed off, anywhere from 4 to 8 barricades per intersection. Of course, multiple intersections are usually required. So $250 is what was suggested per barricade. We have seen some places that charge a flat fee regardless of whether it's 5 barricades or 50 barricades. And as you mentioned, the bollards, there are certain places where the bollards maybe would not require that.
If you send a truck out to a neighborhood, let's say it's across town, and they drop off 2 barricades for one event, that's $5. Staff cost, insurance, everything to go there, that doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if we're gonna impose a fee, let's at least cover the cost of doing it.
Well, it's $250 per barricade, and
Right, if you go to a neighborhood and they cut off one street, that's 2 barricades, that's $5.
It's more than 2 barricades.
That's for an intersection. It's not an intersection when you got 2 streets.
I think what I would do if I were y'all though is I would come up with, and first of all, I like this a lot in general. I think if anything, I would have done the same thing. You're probably low, which is fine. I would, I think the permit needs to be at least $100. That way people, it makes, it sets the table for what we're trying to accomplish here. But I would come up with like a base package and a premium package, kind of like if you were doing, like if you were a caterer, in other words, say, so the permit's $100. Then you have a base package for that we think would be work for these types of events, and we have a premium package, and then after that, everything's a la carte. So if you want an additional police officer, it's gonna, so the base package, I'm making this all up, so don't hold me to anything. So your base package has 2 police officers, 10 barricades, and 1 porta john. Okay, and then your premium package adds this, and this, and then anything you want on top of that. These are your line item prices. That way it might help people kind of transition into how to do this without being a burden to the city, but also not shortchanging themselves too. So
we've seen, of course, looking throughout the state and outside of the state, there is all kinds of different ways that this is done in different communities, both small and large. Of course, city in this way.
I will say, I don't think we should ever say we're charging $2.50 for something. It's just make it free or make it a real number, but $2.50.
You realize the cost when you start thinking about over 300 events annually.
But that kind of goes back to what I was saying, Tina. So if you had, in other words, the base package is 16 barricades, and it's going to cost you $50. I only need 10. You get 16. I only need 8. You get 16. It's $50. If you only want 8, it's $50. It is what it is. So that covers the whole concept.
You got 2 people in a truck, plus gas and everything else.
Well, listen, our friendly public works director came up with these numbers. I questioned that too. He was pretty adamant that he felt like 250 was the number, but yeah, Robert, these are Robert's numbers.
Robert's from the Midwest and still lives in 1967, so we got to leave it right.
part of it was the concept of that.
They should have stand with a big rating.
$5 or $100.
Yeah, I'm with you.
How about a base fee
That's what I'm saying.
of $100 and then a la carte? So you pay a minimum for.
I'll amend my statement to agree with Howard. So I would, hey, I know, write this down. All right, so base fee and then like a package one and then package two, or you go to, base package and then you got a bronze package, a silver package and a gold package if you want to, but make it where people, we want this to be easy. The problem with free is free begets more free. Okay, so if someone says, you can have 4 police officers for free, or you can have 1 police officer for free. Guess what I'm going to choose? I'll take 4. Okay, so because it's free. So again, I would agree that there's a minimum.
Just to clarify, there is no free police officers.
No, it is if you're not paying for them, but yeah.
We pay for, police officers get paid.
They get paid.
I know. But my point was free to people applying for the $5 permit. So anyway, I guess if we can just kind of think about it that way, I think that would actually help a lot.
Well, and the police department admin fee of $5 per hour, why wouldn't that be easier to say $20, $25?
That should be more, because that's the person that's pulling together all these premium gold, silver packages.
I think it should just be built into the price, and it's just.
It is what
It would be built into the price, of course. It's just being able to be transparent in terms of where the cost does go. Although that $5 would come to the city, whereas the other goes directly to the police officer.
But how are you gonna do that if it's one price? Because when I write a check to the officer who worked out there,
It'd have to be.
you have to write 2 checks.
It would have to be.
So we wanted to get these fees down, and we're taking in this feedback, which is good. And then the goal is to ultimately have a third-party solution to help administer these things. But they're just gonna go by whatever fees we tell them, and then some of those administrative costs.
Should we consider that fee to that third party?
We
with
did.
a percentage, and that's reflected in the numbers? Okay.
It is.
That was my question.
Yes, even with the $5 they take $3 per officer.
So Ms. Wilson, do we have to agree on this and get something in place to have these new reflected fees by June, by the advertising?
Next week.
That was why we were bringing them forward, but I think we've got to kind of feel and flavor for what y'all are saying. Listen, we absolutely support doing this. We are also sensitive to educating the public about it. And I mean, if you all are supportive and
that's your call, right? I mean, you can go ahead and put that into action. You don't need a vote from us, or is it you need a true city council vote, or is it a management decision?
It'll be part of the budget when we advertise it. So as long as you all are giving us the feedback, and when you see it, it brings back to you one last time with the notice and all.
But in parallel, there's an ordinance that we have to advertise for this specifically.
You all have to approve it in the ordinance.
Okay. Just remember, a lot of these bigger events are applying for hospitality tax to cover these costs.
Right. But then there's the churches or the community groups too. So that, but if y'all are good, we're good. And
I'm extremely supportive.
But once we do it, there's, leave any judgment calls to me about it as the events come up, as sometimes occurs. Right. But this is to the point that's being made. We put things in place and there's compliance. This is what will be in place. So for anybody who it applies to, this is what would be in place. And I just want everybody to feel good about that. Right?
100% agree.
Yes. 100%. Oh, right.
I will forward that email directly to you.
No problem. And the other thing that we didn't go down the path of, I know Major Drafts and I talked about a little bit with Chief Holbrook, but road closures. I mean, there's some things that aren't in here that we didn't even, broach. Yeah, we could, and eventually maybe we will. There's a lot of that. I sign them every day. So closing roads for Johnny's birthday party in the neighborhood, or the crane that's been at the end of Main Street for weeks and weeks.
So
Those are all that run the gamut of road closures that we are not charging for, but other jurisdictions do. So that's another something to think about.
I mean, obviously in my business, we close a lot of roads and put up signs, and I've never heard of anybody not charging.
Right, so that was another item that
They
could
charge
go on the
business,
list.
they don't charge.
Did you all come up with a schedule or not yet?
Yeah, I mean, but I was saying, like, it's Main Street, we're not charging for that Main Street closure. We charging for Main Street closure?
Well, it's open now.
I know.
We did.
We did, okay, all right. So we are charging,
We did not.
We did not charge.
No, sir. There was something that was attached to that one contingent upon work being done, but no, there was no charge to close it.
I would support that we relook at that as well.
Well, we may build that in.
Some of the road closure fees really cover some of the costs that we're talking about that are like the a la carte type things and delivery of barricades.
I mean, like, for instance, if a typical municipality, if we had to close a road for a day, they're probably charging us $2,000.
Or parade permits often.
Yeah, and if we have to have, crane, then it starts going up fast after that.
Included with them.
It's an expensive birthday party. Crane, your birthday party.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay, so thank you for that. That was great feedback.
And then just as comparative with regards to permit fee, parade permits, this is just graphically demonstrating sort of where the city, about a fee that's been in place a long time, our $5 rate versus proposed for 30, and then it's just now 100. A lot of these places that do have this
$5
have additional fees that are based on some of what you have discussed in terms of variations and other charges that are occurred. But for the most part, the permit fee is processing the application. In some cases, it includes processing the application along with some of the other services we're talking about. Charging for it.
I would recommend that, in my mind, it should be at least $100. I mean, even at $5, the cost of processing it is probably $50 to process a $5 permit. And so the cost for $30 is still, $50. So you're still losing money. So
I think it's probably more than $5 plus the tax.
that's what I'm saying. So in my opinion, it should be somewhat higher.
And with respect to parades, these are typically larger events that are organized
A
with.
walk and a run would require parade permit. So it's not like a typical parade of like a marching band or like that. A walk and a march, a run would be a parade.
Well, closing down a block in 5 points is a parade permit, right?
The parade permit is the city's current mechanism for requesting a street closure.
Right.
Like that, or an event like that.
Well, the run people have money from the registration. You want to walk people.
That's true.
We pay $35 to run.
We all hear about it.
When we do the races, we pay $35 to run. Okay.
Next, we will move on to another item that would require a ordinance change from city council. We're trying to collapse all of these discussions for preparation for noticing of the changes with the same time we would notice the budget public hearing. District Parks and Recreation has also proposed a few modest adjustments to their user fee ordinances. You have a copy of the ordinance for their rates. You can see there's a variety of different rates that Parks and Recreation charges for rental facilities. In this case, they've asked for some a reservation fee for the picnic shelter in Earlwood and Darlington Parks. Primarily because of the fact of the high demand of those two parks for the picnic shelter. So it'd be a reservation fee that's behind it there. And then also too, a request for updating staff support. This is staff that provides services when a park facility is reserved a park facility or park ground, of course. And I apologize, I probably should have cleared these out. The BGM refers to a building and grounds maintenance and the MEO is a motor equipment operator. So that's the specific staff that provides those services. And of course, those are, staff that are associated, that the staff would be charged based on the services we provide. Only 3 of the rates are recommended for change. The others are still the current rate. It's just no change in those rates. We wanted you to see comparatively to what those were. And the reservation fee for Earlwood and Page Island picnic shelters is $40.
Pretty cheap.
I would suggest changing that formula from a $1 increase to a $5 increase and make it $35. Well, why just move it up to $1?
I agree with Howard. That's twice today.
I would,
You're learning.
I would consider a fee waiver if it's requested by a neighborhood association. For example, Hollywood Rose Hill, Hollywood Park, they have 2 or 3 events a year where the whole neighborhood comes out to enjoy the park and fellowship. I would like to see those fees go away for specific neighborhood association requested events. Just something to consider. That doesn't have to happen immediately because we can go ahead and approve the fees, but have that, I guess, the box of waived.
Yeah.
And that might be at staff level.
Joanna forfeit, Hollywood Rose.
Right, yeah.
Well, and some of my neighborhoods, they don't even have dues or fees. They don't have a bank account.
Right.
So they don't have the funds. And they're volunteers. They pay their time.
Because once again, it's different. Your neighborhood association get together versus Little Johnny's birthday.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I don't disagree.
Johnny can go.
So Halloween and Elmwood would apply to that too.
Yeah, because I don't think they raise money.
Yeah, and I think. Hello.
I know you're on there. Hello, Councilman.
Hey, how are you all?
Probably.
You are.
Good. I sort of agree with Mr. Brennan and Mr. Brown. I think that there ought to be, particularly in ML King, there are several events that takes place there. And of course, I would certainly hope that we would waive us, particularly, is it in particular to those events that are taking place? Because there are several events that take place there. So I'm in agreement that those fees ought to be considered and particularly waived if necessary.
For the association?
Yes, ma'am.
For the association?
Yeah, what they can do, they could actually, as part of, they could actually submit something saying these are the events we're gonna have this year. And
that's correct. Now, other events, of course, other than the association events, there are several events that they sponsor on an annual basis, and it would certainly be good if we did that. Thank you.
So I'm clear. So anything a neighborhood would be doing would be any of these, even on an a la carte basis, everything would be waived for the neighborhood doing it. If the neighborhood.
I was specifically referring to like the park fee. I mean, if they need 10 people resources, that's different. But if they just show up at the park by themselves and bring in some card tables and some refreshments, we just let them use the park for free. But if they need support, then I think that would be different. So
again,
I was talking about the park fee.
Like a Halloween in Elmwood where our officers come and we do the barricade and that's a whole thing. What are we saying we're waiving?
Well, considering that I don't
bring something back to us.
I think you'd have to really look at it. But all I was specifically referring to was use of the park for free.
Using a park, big parks.
Yeah. It's a neighborhood association application, the park fee is waived at the park.
Maybe it
Just
would
the park.
clarify that like for instance, the picnic shelters that were mentioned at Page Island and Earlwood, those have a reservation fee. All the other parks are first come, first served. There's no.
Okay.
Okay.
This is just those two parks in particular that Parks and Recreation is proposing to people because of the high demand.
And where
Gotcha,
you,
okay, I just.
So, Annie Mae Dixon and Earl and Douglas, Greenwood, Hollywood, Roseville are listed specifically in your ordinance, but don't require their first come, first served.
And I misunderstood that you were only referring to the park facility itself, and that is the only two they're proposing. But it does beg the question of what I was saying earlier about, you know, this would apply across the board to whomever's doing an event. So if that is a concern you have about
Can we
neighborhood.
approve the fee and send it to the admin committee or something? That's just a thought.
What's the concern? I'm sorry, I had to step out and take that call.
So the concern was if, you know, if a neighborhood association wants to have an event at the park, waiving the park fee, but now it's been made, you know, clear that the park fee isn't universal for every park. There's only a few that it applies to.
And that's what the grounds, the facilities themselves do have rates, and they have a nonprofit rate.
Made it clear again on a different direction.
It would re-clarify.
In general, the rate of the event proposed fee schedule would still apply, is what you all are saying.
Just the option for neighborhood associations to have park status for their neighborhood use or for their parks use. I think it's even at the staff level or the admin committee forms something to bring the council for a fit, but we don't want to winners and losers, obviously.
Right.
and I do think that maybe with, maybe not with some of the proposed fees, but with the parade permits, I do think that our neighborhood associations should see some type of difference. There's some kind of benefit because they're working and volunteering their time throughout the year. And that's probably the thing that I hear the most. Well, we still have to pay and we don't have a budget. So I don't have a specific recommendation. Whatever, maybe what you all hear.
All you're trying to say is you want to be pro-neighborhood.
Yes.
Yeah, we want the neighborhoods to feel that, feel
That's all we're
different.
saying.
Yeah.
Just be pro-neighborhood.
And you can be the boss each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pro-neighborhood.
I would tell you, I'd take some exception, and maybe that's what you're saying, make the judgment calls, which I think we would. We always try to anyway. I don't want to be, like winners and losers, but I do think even with some of our neighborhoods, there are some labor intensive events that may come to mind. And I can't say I would support a blanket. We're not going to pay for our officers just because it's the neighborhood difference. I just want to be clear on that part. But I think we can certainly make judgment calls about what I think I'm hearing.
And you can limit it to maybe, if it's under this size and
less than 10.
Yeah.
Or
something of that nature.
And they're not charging, because if they're charging for the event,
they're making money, then they pay. But most of them.
Okay. So
we don't want that, because if you disguise it as we're holding a neighborhood concert, but we're charging everybody $5 to come, that's different than we're holding the neighborhood picnic.
Or if you pay
contributions to the neighborhood.
Or if you pay a group to come for 5,000, I think you got 100 to pay.
That's true for a lot of the events I think that we're speaking to. Personally, I certainly understand these pieces. These events that are happening, utilizing city services, a lot of the times when they are charging as a fundraiser for their own benefit. So
we'll take a look at it.
Okay. So moving on, the next item is with the police chief, Holbrook, in his last update to you, mentioned a variety of different things affecting police services, one of which was false alarm fees. And so working with legal, the police department is working on a revision to our existing police by false alarm fees. And so the ordinance is in draft. The proposed changes would affect the fees along with some other administrative and other purposes. Chief wants to speak to it, but otherwise the fees, are. So you're currently, I'm sorry, I neglected one of Parks and Recreation, I don't have a slide for, but it's material. There is also proposed changes to, summer camp fees. Those would go into the, proposal for summer camp fees. I neglected to the power, I guess, my columns that is in your packet of materials. It would be, advertised now for public hearing, but the rates are going to affect into the season for next fiscal year.
We don't have anything on.
No, the park.
I mean, I have the electrician, but I don't have summer camp.
No, summer camp's not in here, it's in the memo that was attached. There's a separate.
That was attached to the agenda.
In your big bag.
It was attached.
I got so many different.
That was my fault, I'm there.
It was on the agenda.
They proposed, my understanding, these rates have been again in place for a very long time. With regards to our summer camp day fees. The recommendation currently in City of Columbia, weekly fee for a summer camp is $55. And the proposed is $85 per week. And after school currently is $30 and proposed to $40. Again, these would go into effect next year, next season, but obviously we're going to know about now so that they're discussed the part of them.
You're talking about 24, 25.
Well, they'd be in the fiscal year 23-24 because they would start.
They will go in really in effect.
May, but it would go into effect till summer 24.
I do have.
Well, the after school would start in January 2024.
I did have a question about what our numbers are looking like for the summer camps. And then is this an opportunity to, I know that at some point we were having difficulty in getting people to work the summer camps. Are we still having that difficulty? No. Okay. And so is this an opportunity just to give them $1 or $2 or?
Excellent question. To answer that, no, we are fully staffed regarding summer camps and plus participation. We're at max. We have a very good, so we're getting waiting lists now. So we're doing very well. I think the part of the challenge has been in the past recovery from COVID. I think now we're in a place where people are back to a normal normalcy.
Okay.
And so we're looking really good in progress.
So no need to change pay.
Yeah.
That was our only question, if we needed to incentivize.
We have quite the request list of young people to work for Parks and Recreation in the summer because of that.
Back to police false alarm fees. So the current fee is based on, no fee for first and second occurrence, third, 25, and fourth is 100. Proposed would be still no change to no fee for the first and second occurrence. The third, fourth, and fifth time would be $50, sixth and seventh would be 100, eighth and ninth, 250, 10th and up to 500. The police department has also provided, information about the number of calls for service again, the false alarm specifically, right around 4,500 just for this past year. And of course, they account for about 3% of the total calls. And also averaging about 12, a little over 12 calls, false alarm calls per day.
Well, the calls for service for 165,000, is that 911?
Yes, sir.
Well, your false alarms, the $4,500, 4,500 false alarms, how does that compare with the total number of automated alarms rather than 911? You're using 3% of the 165, which is.
Well, if you're, I'm not sure I understand what you're saying. So
He's trying to draw the line between what's 911 and what. I think that all of it's automated.
it all goes through.
How many good alarms do you get?
Most of
the false alarm.
the majority of our alarms are false. They're bad alarms.
Yeah, so it's not 3%. False alarms is probably 95% of automated alarms.
So how many alarm calls and how many of your alarm calls are false?
Yeah, well, what that number is reflecting is what is defined as false alarms, is the 4,500, and of those false alarms, if you do the math of our annual calls for service, that represents 3%.
But it's almost 95% of the total number of electronic alarms coming in.
So, the 165 is all your calls, all your 911.
Yes.
Not just alarm calls.
Take the 911 out and just do the ones that are automated.
How many alarm calls do you get? And then others, how many alarm calls are false?
How many CPI calls do you get?
Can I say that?
But those go through 911.
Right.
They do?
There you go.
Yeah.
They did. We were doing.
No, they go directly to the.
That is false advertising on the commercial, apparently.
That's why people pay so much money extra on CPI.
Because
That's
911 is monitored.
They get a blue
They
check
have to
from
go
the
through
guy, they get a
911
direct line.
to get the police.
How are
But
you?
they're really quick. I just had a false alarm.
I don't think it's 3%. You leaving? Okay.
See you, Peter.
So now I do have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you have a dog in the home that sets off the glass break,
Or just the motion sensors.
right,
Okay.
and you're in the yard, so you don't hear it, and the officers come, there's no problem.
sounds very specific.
Right. Well, that's why I'm asking.
You're learning. First and second.
And I guess that's
Right.
that's the,
She's talking about the lady across the street from her.
that would be a false alarm.
Yes, ma'am. So with most alarm companies, I'm not the alarm company expert, but the first, just like you have emergency contact, you have their first order of business, unless it's a panic alarm, is they're going to contact that key holder. To say, hey, we've just got an alarm, or did you all do it? Did your dog do it or whatever? And then you would give them the code and they would say, okay, the police would never be called. This represents when police are called. So they all go through 911. Most require at least 2 officers to respond. A lot of them are holdup alarms. A lot of them are daily occurrences. And again, the purpose of this is not to be punitive. It's to change a behavior.
Yeah.
So that's why to me, it's graduated. It's consistent with our previous ordinance, but it became pretty severe. If we got 10 or more, I was thinking $500 would get your attention, but it needs to be corrected. I mean, we've got officers running in an emergency response mode to a lot of these alarms, and it's putting the officer and the public in danger when that occurs. But it also is it's a drain on service. It's taking a couple cars out of service, and a lot of times we're waiting for a key holder to clear a building or clear a house, or so it's about changing the behavior. And again, the ordinance, it wasn't that we necessarily had a bad ordinance, we just didn't, this puts a little more teeth in that, but this makes it work in conjunction with this software that we're proposing, we go to that automates it. Currently, the ordinance requires us to write a police report, manually review those police reports, and then bill or notify the resident of the business that their alarm was false and we had to respond. This is all automated through our CAD system.
Do you know the mix between false alarms between business and residential?
I do, and then I don't have that with me.
But it's more residential, obviously.
We do define that in our system.
Right. And is there any kind of national data from maybe the software provider you're going to work with that'll show what the decrease from that 12.3 would be?
Yes, sir.
Once 18 months into it, we're looking at less than 6, cut in half.
There is, and I apologize, I don't have that off the top of my head. They absolutely have that as part of our discussion, and I often refer to some.
But even if you cut them in half from 12 to 6, what's that? Take probably an hour, 45 minutes for an officer to respond to one, maybe. So, I mean, you can put the manpower.
You can quantify it, yeah.
Well, and I'll add, we've had some discussions about looking at using alternative sources to go to two places that are.
Yeah, we'll talk
have a
about that.
history of
Right.
false alarms, but we're not taking a sworn officer and tying up an hour of his time.
I would suggest collapsing one of those, taking the $50 out and going 100, 250, and 500, starting at say 4.
$100 at 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
Give it
quite
first, second, and third,
3 strikes and you're out.
and then you start getting $100 up to 8,
That works.
and
That works.
then
3 strikes.
8 and 9th would be 250, and 10 and up are 500.
How much money have we collected in that currently?
We
You
started
don't enforce it.
Make it worthwhile. $50 is not enough to change the.
Behavior.
You think we should wait till the third occurrence though before we start?
Recurrent be found me.
Start
Start
on,
at
start
3.
on the 3rd.
Start at 3.
Yeah, I'll
I
get
think
that.
start on 3.
Third,
3 through 7, $100.
3 through 7.
And part of that automated, notification of the first 2 occurrences would be, if they would receive notice of the false alarm and explaining what's ahead if they don't correct that.
Right.
And, the first one would just be a friendly reminder. Second one would be maybe a more strongly worded reminder. And then the third one would be the first ouch.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question is, how do we enforce it? If they don't, they just don't pay.
It's
Becomes a order
defined in the ordinance.
to civil.
It turns into a civil,
like any
a debt.
collection.
It becomes a debt.
Yes.
Okay.
Or it would be a non-response.
You can put one of those parking services automatic appeals. Automatic.
So if we put it through the ordinance next week, when can you be up and running with the new system? The new software or whatever?
That's probably an IT question. I'll have to have that answer for you too.
Well, I mean, the goal is to be, I give it maybe 60 days. I don't see why we should be.
There should be no benefit to that
60 days from July.
from the date of the ordinance approval. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we can meet that timeline.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And our final item is bringing back a proposed pay plan for fire. Based off our discussions with Richland County and the staff discussions more than mine, but discussions on a fairly high level at Richland County. They are going to participate. They do want to fund the pay plan as proposed, their portion of it. They have the ability to pay for it outside of any type of village adjustment. So I know we talked about that. If they did that, then that would, of course, probably would have allowed us to also pay for it. But that isn't their approach, and I can, hey, if they're able to do it without that, that's great. I think they are progressively looking at some other things as well, as far as their countywide plans for their employees and a STEP program is our understanding.
Outside of
Fire. Mhm. And so at this point, in order for us to effectuate the pay plan, then we wanted to review all the secondary solution that we didn't get into last time. I mean, you probably could read between the lines that this would have been the next option. And so that is really just a simple slide to show you how we would fund the pay plan.
Okay. City Manager.
Yes, sir.
My understanding is that this plan only does the suppression services and not the administrative or other people that work for the fire department.
No, sir, it would be it would be across the board.
It'd be everybody.
Be sworn.
Everyone's, well, what is your question? Sworn?
Well, I want to make sure that the people that work for the fire department that aren't in suppression, like the people that go out and do the hydrant management, the administrative staff and everybody else gets some sort of a boost in pay too. And my understanding is that this is only for the people that ride the trucks, the suppression services.
It's for more than who ride the trucks, but they would be the sworn staff.
Everybody fits into that classification chart that the chief provided.
Everybody that would fit in
Everybody
who
that works for the fire department will be on that chart somewhere.
there. No, but it's a very small amount of administrative, but there are some, if that's your question, then we need, that wouldn't.
Can we look at to see how many that is and if we can give them a comparable boost?
So the boost that this is going into a different discussion that I was hoping to bring you on next Tuesday, regarding citywide and the staff in not just fire, but I mean, there's police non-sworn staff, there's all types of staff across the city who haven't seen an adjustment. So if we were able to, the citywide proposal would capture, I think, the individuals you're talking about.
I'd like to make sure that since we're doing fire, I'd like to make sure all of the city staff get properly compensated, but I'm particularly concerned about the fire.
Yes, sir.
And if we left out administrative people when we did police last year, then we need to take care of that too.
Well, we need to take care of a lot of people, and that's the scenario across the city that were not sworn public safety officials.
But wouldn't fire be a
But
special case because the people that aren't sworn are working in a contract with our contract with the county, which they pay half of. So their work is also benefiting the delivery of services to the
Half of
county.
theirs are being covered by Richland County.
They're not. They're not. I mean, unless I'm totally.
Maybe I just don't understand what the jobs are that I was referring to.
So administrative staff, the county wouldn't be paying for right now, administrative staff.
So do they pay for like Chief Jenkins' salary, the higher command, they're all sworn?
County, the administrative staff is split, but there's not the rate, the proposed pay plan does not incorporate non-sworn staff.
And do we have any idea of what that number is of unsworn staff in fire?
Yeah, absolutely.
That'll be
What-
captured in the citywide. Right?
That's the way I would propose to handle it, but if you all are suggesting that fire personnel be handled sworn and unsworn through this pay plan, then we would just have to run the numbers to add those individuals into it.
Well,
Which is
I
what
agree,
I
I
gave.
agree with Councilman Brennan, the fire non-suppression fire should be treated differently than the non-sworn police, because the non-suppression fire are gonna be paid for half by the county, or should be.
I think what we have done in the past is
I have to
all
look at
those are
the
under when we
actual
do citywide.
positions.
So the city is paying for 100% of the
No, we
non-suppression
only pay
fire.
our part.
That's what,
We only pay our part. We don't
and the county pays for it. So that-
But I see theoretically, you're saying because it is a contract, then we ought to bill for a percentage of any costs associated from a personnel standpoint,
Yes,
whether
ma'am.
they're sworn or non-sworn.
Suppression or non-suppression, because the sworn are police officers. And we ought to pay 100% of their administrative support, because the county doesn't pay any of that.
Like a engine maintenance set or something. They might not be sworn, but
So the-
they're keeping the trucks on the road, which should be.
But
a
they are,
portion-
they
should
are
go.
included.
Fi-
Yeah,
fi-
they are,
fire-
I
Yes, it is. I don't know what's that.
We don't know
The can-
what
Right.
that
There are
is.
454 employees in the fire department. If you look at the budget, it includes like 400 and something. I mean, it pretty much covers everybody because that includes the line maintenance guys, the fire marshals, this and that.
I didn't ask the chief, well, chief's out of town, but I didn't ask the assistant chiefs to be here today because I wasn't anticipating there were any other questions about how or who it covered. I thought it was more
I
about
didn't see it
funding
coming until Howard
piece.
said something.
But,
Non-sworn staff,
Yeah.
there's a small number of non-sworn staff in the fire department. That administrative staff is split between the city and the county in terms of their costs.
not him.
But they didn't get the pay rate.
They're not in this one, as Ms. Wilson mentioned, they would be part of a citywide.
But they're not, you're not giving them, they're not,
It's
they're
support
not,
staff.
they're not at the same level from the disparity. You can't just
Maybe not.
universally do that. That was, I think, Ms. Wilson's point is that you're going after the folks that were disparity. The other portion is gonna be taken care of when you do the other administrative, because we've got to address the other administrative across the city.
I
Well,
agree.
they're all at a different level. We're not just universally raising everybody to this level.
Right.
You're going by what the study shows, and it varies depending to get people into the market rate, if I said that correctly.
You did, Mayor. You
Well,
did. It was based off,
I'll
comparable
have
fire
to make sure
positions.
that everybody's getting some type.
Sure.
That's what.
And we are on the same page about that.
and I think the county ought to pay half of it for the fire department.
They do.
They do.
For the positions that justifiably they ought to be
Right.
paying for.
Contribute to the
Contributing
service
to.
delivery.
It's a Columbia Richland Fire Department, and Richland,
Well,
I think they're willing to step up.
yeah. So to that point, though, I think, the county is demonstrating they want to participate, and we can definitely take a second look at, which positions and all. I think we've looked at that pretty closely, and the positions are tailored to address the service delivery that is given and what they ought to be participating in a cost share for. The other positions throughout the city that have not realized any type of COLA and or merit, my goal was to bring that to you on next week so we can see kind of what we've done over the last several years. I think we are no different, and it's clearly showing me that with some of the anecdotal information we're getting from our colleagues and in our closest jurisdictions about progressive measures they're going to be taking through their budgets when it comes to workforce and salaries and COLAs and merits. Richland County, I don't know, I never know for sure what anybody's doing until they do it, but that's what we're hearing. They're looking at STEP programs, some pretty hefty adjustments, Lexington County as well. Not sure about a STEP program, but we've heard up to 10% adjustments. So to be competitive, to be progressive, for me, it's not just about the salary increases, though. I've heard you all talk about evaluations and what a robust merit system ought to look like. I also want to clarify, we have always had an evaluation system. People are always evaluated, whether or not, and particularly since the pandemic, that system of evaluation needs to be reset. I absolutely think it should. And I think it ought to incorporate some pretty novel things to encourage some of our employees in the field who are doing really well, and maybe some that aren't doing as well to do better, but to give them opportunities to give us what they're seeing and talk about efficiencies and talk about things that may be redundant to them, and maybe get some boxes checked for points, but a evaluation system that they can feel and see and understand. So we've been working on some meeting with Denise and Pam, and I met with some experts in the field, people we want to bring into the fold perhaps to create training opportunities, personal and professional development, a different system. I love to look at, incentivizing that type of culture where people are interested in what they're doing and making the city better. And that be part of a merit-based evaluation system that everyone understands. And I think the mayor's been talking about that. All of you have on some level, and it's just time to do that. But when we do that, obviously, paying people for performing well is kind of the name of the game of what we're seeing around us, and to be in line and progressive with our nearest jurisdictions, probably going to be a very real discussion we have to have. And that was how I was hoping to accommodate these other very well deserving employees you're talking about.
That's fine with me. I look forward to that discussion next week.
All right, sounds good. But with the fire pay plan, we do need a reoccurring funding source that would accommodate the 1.4 as we've calculated it. And the hybrid fee is the proposal for a 10% adjustment.
I'd still like to ask some of the entities to contribute. I think we need to formalize a letter to the university, to the state, and the other folks who benefit from the fire service that don't contribute. I think it's a fair ask. And I think we ought to generate that out this week.
I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, but I would make that request a freestanding request, not connected with this particular thing. That
no,
for here on out, we need to
we're gonna have further funding.
We need to wait for them to compensate us for the protection we give them both from fire and police.
And well, most of, the state and the university have we supplement some of that, but fire, we do 100%. And with the campus continuing to grow, and if you look at it, we've never collected fees, and since I've been here, it's doubled. So I think it's fair. I think all universities and colleges that we service should put something in proportionately.
Yeah.
And I think we need to ask. The state says they'll do it, but I think we should ask. I think it's absolutely fair for those folks to contribute. They don't pay the same amount of water fees or anything. So asking for a contribution towards that, because what we're looking at is 24, 25, 25, 26.
We in previous councils have discussed a dormitory bed fee of $100 a year.
Per bed.
And I think that might be a legitimate way for us to get, especially from the university.
Well, the university's not just beds anymore.
For labs.
Restaurants and labs and research.
They ought to be paying retail
and so, when you start looking at all of that combined, so I think I think it's worth us asking.
I think the letter opens the door to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Who do you suggest it come from? You or me to the agency head or the college president?
So we jointly send it. We send it to president and CFO, CEO, send it all of the above. Chairman of the board too.
Okay, we can work on that.
Hospitals contribute.
No, that's good. That's come up before, but we didn't get very far. It came up.
We're gonna have a medical school. We're gonna have,
There are 19 employees in the fire service that are not a part of that pay plan.
No, you're 400 something, but 19 different.
Yeah, okay.
19 that are administrative.
I'm looking out for those names.
And I know they appreciate that, in all seriousness.
How did you get that number? You got somebody text you or something?
Pam, she went out and came back in. And with it on her little sticky note. Well, that is it for today, I believe. Yes.
It is, I probably should have done a closing slide in the sense of those items that we would move forward with would be public hearing. Notice would be required to be prepared and sent to publication for next Thursday in preparation for June sixth public hearing, if that's the day we move forward with all of these proposed other changes in connection with the budget. So that in first reading. Of course, the budget is the first, the primary one, but these others would be additional.
So we're staying for the first and the first meeting and
That's the plan. That's your regular scheduled council.
I'd say get it ready.
We will do that. And short of hearing back from these letters and appeals, in general terms, is the funding source that y'all are comfortable with?
It's good.
Yeah, I think for us though, there's something that this stuff we're looking for from them is really for 24, 25. Yeah. But we need to plan ahead.
That is all that was on the agenda.
Thank you, Missy. Thank you all. Appreciate it.